All right, welcome back to another episode of Two Plane Sports. Today, we're early in the bye week, so obviously not a lot of football to talk about, nor do we really want to talk too much about football after the events of this past weekend. But Brandon and I and a couple other friends have just had a back and forth over the last couple of days talking about the head coaching situation at Oklahoma. I think it's a really controversial topic amongst the fan base. So we're going to talk about why Brent Venables shouldn't be on the hot seat after this season, or why should he be on the hot seat. So make sure to go in the comment section down below. Let us know what you think the direction of this program should be. No BB, BB. Give us your opinions. Make sure to like, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell. Follow us on all the social medias linked in the description down below. All right. So Oklahoma starting out 5-5 in the third season of Brent Venables. Obviously, a really disappointing loss to Missouri this past weekend, and really just a disappointing season. This offense just can't seem to put anything that looks competent on the field, really, for longer than two quarters at a time. After with about 3 games in between of competence, so it's pretty tough to really say anything positive about Oklahoma's offense. Even when they do something good, they seem to mess it up. If you watch basically any other Oklahoma podcast, I mean, the Oklahoma Breakdown is probably the most popular one that a lot of people will watch and like really listen to the commentary on how this team is playing. I don't think Gabe Eichert has said too much positive. Like he's definitely tried to stay as positive as he could, but even for someone that tries to be pretty optimistic, it seems to be tough for him so far throughout the season. So again, we've been talking about should Brent Venables be on the hot seat? Is it really just an offensive coordinator's problem that can be fixed over a matter of an offseason? I am on the BV hot seat side. Brandon is on BV's side and keeping him for at least another year, maybe longer. He can explain himself when he uh, when he starts to go, and which he will here shortly. But the the outlook so far is bleak. So Brandon, why shouldn't Brent Venables be on the hot seat after this football season?
I think why would you put him on there? I don't know what that's going to solve. I think he's a guy that recruits very well. You look at year one, he still had a good recruiting class, got there late. Lincoln Riley took a lot of the staff with him. He took Caleb Williams, who was the best player in college football at the time, with him. Brent Venables brought in the right staff. I think defensively, nobody has a problem with anybody he's hired on that side of the ball. I think we're all very, very happy and content with his defensive side of the ball hires. I think he had the right idea initially with the Jeff Levy hire. It obviously didn't work out in year one, but I think that's brand new players, a brand new quarterback. You're installing a new game plan, his kind of game plan. It takes some time to gel and to mesh, And then year two, when we were fully healthy, year two for Dylan Gabriel, year two for Jeff Levy, year two for everybody, you saw drastic improvement. Offensively, defensively, you saw a team that won 10 games that I think really should have won 12. I think Jeff Levy called the worst game of his life in that Kansas game. It kind of lost us that game. I think in Stillwater, there's a blatant pass interference that goes uncalled that I think we punch it in there and probably end up winning that game. Then you're 11-1, even with Kansas last year, 11-1, and you're playing Texas again in the Big 12 title game. You win that game, you're a playoff team. And then who knows? It's a 14 playoff last year. If it could have went our way, who knows? Would have been fun. This year, I get, he tried to promote from within with Seth Luttrell. It didn't work out, but there's only one way to know that, and that's to actually try it. And he did. Didn't work out. I think if you hire the right OC this offseason, you've kind of fixed the O-line, because you also got to think Bill Bedenbaugh replaced all 5 of his guys on that offensive line. This is a brand new offensive line. And it's been terrible. It's been unacceptably bad. But I mean, it is a brand new offensive line. So next year he'll have EPL year 2. Isaiah Autry's a guy that might get in there. Maybe he starts some freshmen next year finally, like we've been banging the table for. Maybe Mike Vasusi or Ryan Foji, one of those guys gets to start. I think there's saying he needs to be on the hot seat is a drastic overreaction to a very bad situation that we find ourselves in this year. I think even if we were fully healthy, perfect, and all that stuff, I don't think that we're, you know, an 11, 12 win team, but I think this team is easily 8 to 9, and then no one's worried about it. And it's injuries definitely hurt. I think the offensive line's been bad, but his defense is still very good. And I get that they blew that Missouri game, but if you think about it, they're also the reason that we were in the game in the first place. They held Missouri all night. They get a scoop and score late to take the lead, with 2 minutes to go, and just probably played their worst series of the season in the biggest moment. And that was, very unfortunate. I think if we can go back to that 3rd and 16 play, probably 9 times out of 10, that's your game. We probably force an incomplete pass or make it 4th and long, 4th and 12, 11, whatever, and get out the field and win the game. I think that was the 1 out of 10 times where they're going to beat us there. And it unfortunately happened. But, I think next year the defense is going to be just as fine. You lose Stutz, you lose Bowen, but I mean, there's some guys there, and that defense is going to continue to progress in the right direction. And I think, now he knows after a year, promoting from within didn't work. JJF is a little bit better, but not the answer long term. You hire the right guy as an OC, like you did it in the first place with Jeff Levy. Jeff Levy left. That hurt us a lot more than I think we anticipated. But you hire the right guy this offseason, let him have a full season or whole offseason to, bring in some of his guys, implement a system. Because realistically, we don't have to score 45, 50 points a game to win anymore. If we can score 25 to 30 points a game, which is very doable, we're winning. We're in a chance to win every single game. And I think that's something that can be attained in one offseason.
Okay. So the reason I think that Brent Venables should be on the hot seat after this season, and I'm not saying fired after this season, hot seat for sure though, is because of his unwillingness to at least prove that he puts as much discipline with this offense as he does with his defense. If you listen to him every single press conference for the last 2.5 years, he's pretty critical of his defense. And I totally get it. He is one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. That's not his job anymore. He's a head coach of a football team and one of the better football programs in the country. You can't just focus on your defense. You listen to him in a press conference, he'll say, not perfect on the defense. We're missing things, not hitting the right gaps, missed assignments, poor communication, so on and so forth. You hear him talk about the offense. Every once in a while, he'll say something more critical of them, but he's pretty soft on them. He's not as hard on his offense and seemingly his offensive staff as he is on his defensive staff. And you just can't do that as a head coach. You have to have your same standard for everyone on your team: offense, defense, player, coach, assistant, whatever. That just doesn't seem to be the case right now. If he can flip a switch in himself for whoever his hire is next this offseason and keep that standard high, because that's one thing he has preached since he got here, is you have to set a standard and play to it, not play to your opponent. He hasn't done that or set that standard for his offense, and I think that's pretty fair to say after this season. This offensive line, and I tweeted about it, I think. We've been talking about it. It's not even the inconsistency at the offensive line at this point. It's like you saw a glimpse of hope when you had Eddie Pierre-Louis in, because he had that like nasty factor as an offensive lineman. And I feel like you need one of those with your O-line. You need someone that's willing to almost just plant someone's head in the dirt if they ever do anything that's remotely dirty towards your quarterback, your wide receiver, running back, their fellow offensive lineman. You don't have anyone on this offensive line that has that kind of demeanor. Their inconsistencies are frustrating, but then next year, Coach B is going to have to replace the entire offensive line again, anyways, with the exception, I guess, at this point of the left side of the line, because you've had to deal with so much injury, which I'll give him that. He's dealt with injury, but his young guys are finally starting to step up. And look what they're doing. They get more reps in real game time, and they're starting to improve. It wasn't perfect to start their time as starters, but Ozida and Howland have definitely looked better than the guys on the right side of the line who are the transfers. So at some point, like if you clearly believe in how your defensive staff develops, but for whatever reason, you don't set that same standard for your offensive side of the ball. You let them kind of use the portal as um, their fallback plan that they go to way too much. It's kind of ridiculous. Their coaching hire. Seth Luttrell is just obviously the wrong hire, and I think hand up, I definitely thought that he would be better than he was. We talked about him last season. He statistically his offenses were never bad, really. Like were they like Lincoln Riley, Jeff Lebby level? No, but they also weren't what he showed this year with Oklahoma. What was a huge detriment is like the lack of forethought from my for Brent Venables thinking maybe this guy that's never coached quarterbacks can come in and coach not just the quarterback room for the first time, but a very raw quarterback room. You bring back no experience as an Oklahoma starter or returning player in that room. Jackson Arnold is your first year starting quarterback. You have a true freshman in there, and then a college journeyman, since we have those now in college football, that was having to deal with injuries when he first came to the program. And he might be ready now, but does he know the offense? Because he's had less experience than the other two guys in trying to catch up on studying for the game planning for this team, these players, these guys around him. So I think it's just again the hot seat is because there's you have to hold him accountable for the just blatant disregard for one side of the whole team. Like Lincoln Riley, we were all starting to get frustrated with him about this time in his career as head coach at Oklahoma. But the reason he wasn't on the hot seat per se was because he was winning football games. His defenses sucked. They were horrible, but he won football games and because he was able to score the ball. But if your defense isn't good enough to be like Iowa, where you can win 10-0, then you got to be able to score the ball. And you're never going to win in this conference winning 10 to, you're never going to hold realistically in an 8 conference schedule or 8 game conference schedule. You're not going to hold 8 of them to 10 points. These offenses are too good. These players are too talented to be held to that low of a scoring total. So that's my reasoning for why he should be on the hot seat.
Well, I think
Now,
the reality of the situation is, no matter what anybody thinks, is after a presumably 5-7 season, I don't see a world in which we beat Alabama or LSU right now. Obviously, I hope we win both, but I don't see it realistically. So you probably finish 5-7 this year. So I mean, I think no matter what anybody thinks or wants, next season he will be on the hot seat. 6-7 year one, but I think that's kind of a year that I genuinely think, Josie and the higher ups and stuff kind of, I don't know if they want, if you can ever say you expected to be 6-6 in the regular season, but it's definitely a year where I don't think you expected to be competing for a national title. Year one, brand new staff, brand new players everywhere. You're implementing new things. I think you kind of expected a little bit of a down year. And then year two, their money. It's a top 5 offense in the country. Defense took massive leaps. And then, but you go into this year and you have higher hopes because of that 10-win season. But I think when you take a step back and really look at it, the guys that we lost that we thought would be easy to replace were not that. We're not, easily replaceable dudes. Dylan Gabriel is not just a good college quarterback. He's a guy that has a legitimate shot at a Heisman this year. He's playing very good football. He's got Oregon undefeated. He's an elite level college quarterback that we let leave, which, it is what it is now. It sucks, but he's gone. Jeff Lebby is a guy that, I think we all took very much for granted, in hindsight now. He's a guy that was never perfect, but I mean, he coordinated a top 5 offense in the country last year with a great quarterback, great receivers. Offensive line was good enough. Replacing 5 guys sucks. I think that right there is your silver lining. He has showed before in the past that he can hire the right OC. Jeff Lebby was the right OC hire. No matter what anybody says about it, he was the right guy to hire at OC. He brought in Dylan Gabriel. They worked out a great system. I mean, year 2 they were fantastic. I think if he hires the right guy this offseason, which there's reason to believe he can do it, with Jeff Lebby being your example there. I think, and you let that guy kind of do what he wants to do with the staff, even if we don't necessarily love what it looks like at first. You just kind of trust the process there. The defense is not going anywhere. Because again, you need to be in that 25 to 30 point range, which is very doable. That's not even an elite level offense. That is a good to borderline great in some games, borderline great some games offense, but it's not anything elite. And I think that can be that is very obtainable. I think there's reason to believe is what I'm getting to, and I think just hire the right guy. It all starts there. I think there's a good chance to do it, and he's going to be on the hot seat next year. I mean, you're going to go 5-7 this year. You're going to miss a bowl game for the first time in 25 years or whatever it is. That's obviously that's horrible, especially in a situation where you 1,000% should be bowl eligible. That Missouri game was a game that we invented a new way to lose. That was probably the most devastated I've been in a loss since that Rose Bowl game, which, it's just because I know we're not very good this year, but you really want to keep that streak alive. And to lose it in the fashion they did, it really stinks. But it is what it is. It's over now. I think if he doesn't win 8 games next year, I think that's probably your number. If you don't go at least 8-4, because it's going to be the same schedule. It's going to be a daunting schedule again. You're going to have Texas, LSU, Alabama, all those guys again. I think if you go 8-4, but part of those 8, you pick up a win against Texas and Bama, Missouri maybe, because we obviously want to get them back now. But if you win 8 games, I think he's going to be safe. Show some improvement. And I think even as a fan base, we expect to win national titles. That is the hope. That's what we want. But I think this offseason, we're going to have to really look at it as a 5-7 year, terrible season. If we can show improvement like that and win 8 games and score the ball and beat some really good teams next year, if we go on the road at Bryant-Denny next season and beat Alabama as part of our 8 wins and, we're scoring the ball, I think we'll all kind of relax a little bit and see that there's real improvement. Because at that point, it would be an 8-4 season, and then that offseason, you're going into year 2 with that same offensive coordinator likely, and then you're really starting to build on that, and that's maybe your window.
I don't totally disagree with that stance because it's one thing we talked about like earlier this season when we were still a little hopeful about how things were going to end up this season. But when Luttrell got fired, we jumped on this podcast and said, Finley, probably not the guy, but Brent Venables has shown that he can hire the right guy. For whatever reason, he decided not to last offseason. And I think that's going to be, regardless of what happens next season, then this coming offseason, we're gonna look back in 5-10 years and say that's where Brent Venables really screwed himself and developing this program at the right trajectory, because he did have it on the right path, but for whatever reason he decided I need to replace both defensive and offensive coordinators, which fine, that's his decision to make. You made the right pick as your DC, because basically someone that has the exact same demeanor is going to run your defense, knows it already. So it was really just having someone come in and kind of take that responsibility from him almost fully. Then on your offensive side, I mean, presumably the reason you pick Seth Luttrell there is not just because of his offensive success in the past, but because he's been a head coach before and he can manage a team, or has shown to some extent, even though he's been fired in his head coaching stop before, that he can manage a team. But again, like the OC that gets hired this offseason, because it shouldn't be Finley. If it's Finley, just fire all of them, because that is just a blatant disregard for not just the fan base, but and you're actually not looking at what's in front of you, because there's been a lot of personnel issues. For example, why is Xavier Robinson not on the field earlier in the season after what we saw him do this past game? But going back, I don't think necessarily the new offensive coordinator would even want to do like a full staff change. One, because you're realistically hitching your wagon to what could be a sinking ship if things don't turn around next offseason. So if you bring in a whole new offensive staff, you're putting them in a position to get fired within a year. It's going to be hard to get an offensive coordinator. The selling point is, look, you can come in and run this offense how you want. I'm going to be there to, be your support, but I'm going to be hands off because I need you to like implement your standard here. Just make sure that we're playing winning football. But he has to be a quarterback coach because that's what you need. That's pretty obvious this season. You need someone that can help develop your quarterbacks. You're gonna need a tight end coach because I've been critical of Finley for years now. That dude can't recruit, and people are gonna point back to Devon Mitchell.
Mitchell.
If it wasn't for Hawkins, Devon Mitchell is not a Sooner, and I'll die on that hill. But he can't recruit, and when he does recruit anyone good, for whatever reason, they don't touch the field, and when they do, they're not really productive. So there's the lack of development and a lot of recruiting. So Finley has been a problem for the staff for years, in my opinion. You need a tight ends coach. I don't think you necessarily need an offensive line coach. As frustrating as this year has been with Coach B, the young guys have played. So if he can just get out of his own way and let his young guys develop in real game action, that's what those non-conference games are for to start the season. You let them get real snaps so that once you get into conference play, they're battle tested. They'll know how to communicate. You can't just keep shifting all these transfers around to see what fits, and now you're 10 games in and you still don't know how your line's going to look. Injuries happen in football. I'm not going to take that away from, like, I'm not going to hold that against him because that's obviously out of anyone's control. But you can't keep just doing this, show to play freaking Tetris with your offensive line. Let there be some continuity there. Um, Emmett Jones, I think he's done well so far in like the development and recruiting of the wide receivers. That right there is a room where you're fully decimated. I'll give him that. You lose Nick Anderson for what was expected to be a few games, and now it's the entire season. Deion Burks, you lost for 3 games. Andrew Anthony, you hope to get back, and really he played a half of football and hasn't been able to come back due to his knee. You lose Joel
In
Farouk
the
after
off
one.
season, Joel Farouk
Yeah.
week 1. Yeah, that was just
So
disaster.
it's tough there. Still, I think you should expect that your wide receivers do a little bit better, but I think there's also some blame to put on the play design behind all of it because no one was schemed open. You never really saw anyone just run down the field freely like you do in every other college football game around the country. You can turn on any college football game, no matter how bad or how perceivingly the brand isn't as big as Oklahoma. Vanderbilt, for God's sake. They've been the laughing stock of football, but their offense can scheme someone open to make a play. So I think to an extent that the wide receivers were at a detriment because the offensive coordinators have been god awful this year. Running backs, I think if you wanted to move on from DeMarco Murray, I don't think it would be the end of the world. Is it necessarily the best choice for the room? Maybe not, because Taylor Tatum and him seem to have a good relationship. And he's like Sooner legend. But I think you can if you had to replace Marco Murray, I think it wouldn't be the end of the world. Like it would suck for sure, but you could probably get someone in there that can be just as effective when it comes to coaching the running backs.
I don't know, man. I think DeMarco Murray's done a pretty solid job, actually. You look at what Javonte Barnes has done this season. He's really coming on now. He's kind of doing what Gavin Sawchuk did last season. Where Gavin was okay, the first 4 or 5 games, whatever it was, and then, really after that Texas game, he became a very good running back. He was a threat, and I think Javonte Barnes has kind of taken that same kind of jump this season. It obviously sucked to have him against Missouri, but Taylor Tatum's a guy that's going to be an absolute stud. There's so much potential there. His only issue right now is he likes to drop the ball, which is a massive issue for a running back to have. But I do think that's something that he's going to be able to fix going forward. Xavier Robinson's a guy that looked like a stud. That he showed a lot of promise. He's a guy that I think a lot of people are very excited about. So I think the OC, whoever it is, because if you think about it, Jeff Lebby, when he first took the job, I don't know if it was his choice or not, but he was stuck with DeMarco Murray, with Bill Bedenbaugh, and it worked for them. And I think the OC is going to have, if he sticks with his current staff and just whatever. He can probably hire a quarterback coach because I do think that's something that is obviously going to be a priority. I think we can learn from that this season. You got to hire a good quarterback coach. I think, but it's, I think, the sky's not falling quite as bad as we think it is. This season sucks, but decimated with injuries. Terrible OC hire, who's now gone out of the picture. I do think if Joe John, I agree with you. I think he's a guy that you can easily move on from and not be too devastated, even if Devon Mitchell were to leave, because I don't really know how much of him committed to Joe John Finley versus Mike Hawkins. I kind of think you might be onto something there, but I don't know if you keep I don't know if you keep both of these quarterbacks this offseason. I could see a world in which one of them leave, potentially both, and that's, some people might think that's a good thing. Actually, I think losing both would suck, but there's people out there who aren't very high on either quarterback. So you hire the right OC. Whatever happens at the quarterback position, ideally, I think you keep both. I still think that Jackson Arnold has what it takes to be the guy of the future. I think, especially if you can. I don't care who you have at quarterback this season playing at Oklahoma. If it's Dylan Gabriel, I do think you're probably a little bit better off right now because Dylan Gabriel is that good. But I don't think you're a 10-win team like you were a year ago. I think Dylan Gabriel's running for his life. I think he's still throwing to guys that would not have really played this entire season if all five are healthy. I think if all five guys were healthy, the big
Still
five.
no more on that offensive coordinator.
Yeah, still a bad OC hire. I think all five receivers hurt, and the offensive line is horrible. So even if you have Dylan Gabriel, he's still playing with all those handicaps. I think you're definitely bowl eligible. I think you're probably 6-6 or 7-5, but it's not a great season. So you have to give Jackson or Michael Hawkins, whoever it is, that benefit of a doubt, a little bit at least, especially them being very young players. With Jackson Arnold having had one career start going into the season, and Hawkins 0. So I mean, they're young, they're running for their life, and they're throwing to guys that probably weren't ever going to see the field in a ideal world for Oklahoma. So there's a lot of handicaps there for both quarterbacks. I think we're not really seeing either one of their full potential or ability because of stuff like that. And that is something you would assume is not going to happen back-to-back years. If you can avoid a huge portal exodus, if you're going to lose some players. I think that's just the way of college football, especially after a year like this. But if you don't have just a huge exodus where all five receivers leave, both quarterbacks leave, all your running backs take off, if you lose one or two receivers, if you lose one of the quarterbacks, if you lose – because I think you're going to lose Gavin Sawchuk or something like that. You lose Sawchuk or something. That's going to be – it's obviously not great to see any of those guys leave, but that's, I think, a portal loss that you can bounce back from, kind of be okay. You're not dead there. If you have all five receivers leave, all two quarterbacks leave, all running backs leave, you're really going to be in a bad spot again. But I think if you avoid that, and I think we will, if Brent Venables meant what he said, I don't think he just lie about it. Or, I mean, I'm sure the players said it, and I'm hoping that they're not just lying about it. But if all five receivers truly do come back, if you fix that offensive line, you bring in the right offensive coordinator, so then you have whoever's playing quarterback is not running for their life every single snap. If it happens every now and again, that's football. Sometimes you get beat. It's a blitz, something, and you're just screwed. But if you're not running for your life every play, if you have five good receivers to throw the ball to, there's a lot of reason to believe this offense could be good next season. And again, we don't have to be an elite offense. We have to be a good offense. Not even great, really. Good. Score 27 points, and you're going to be in a lot of games. And I think 8 wins is that mark next year, because no matter what anybody says, like I said earlier, Brent Venables is going to be on the hot seat next season. I think he's safe this year. No doubt they're going to – I don't think they fire him this offseason. He'll come back, but I think I'm putting it at 8. I think 8 wins is your number next year. If you don't have at least 8 wins, if we're 6-6 or 7-5 next year, I think there's a real chance BV's gone, and I don't want that. He's a guy that I think all of us are really pulling pretty hard for.
Yeah, I think he's obviously seems seemingly a really good dude Obviously, he has a lot of ties to Oklahoma. You just can't. You can have the best culture in the world, but unless you're winning, that doesn't mean shit. Okay, so I really wanted to touch on the schedule for next season. So as Brandon's mentioned, you get the same conference schedule. So it just flipped. So instead of Bama coming to Oklahoma, we'll be going to Tuscaloosa, so on and so forth. So you're gonna be in different road environments, maybe to an extent, maybe tougher road environments. You're gonna go to Rocky Top. You're gonna go to Tuscaloosa. You'll be at South Carolina. Hopefully, that's not a night game because it's
That
impossible to
place
win at that
is
place
scary
at
at
night.
night. Yeah,
So you're gonna have maybe a more difficult road schedule. The and for the most part, really, other than Texas and Alabama, you're gonna have teams that will have some continuity with their quarterbacks. They'll obviously everyone's got turnover, like Brandon has mentioned, but you're gonna face the challenge is still gonna be there, and if anything, at a higher clip. I would say 8 games is kind of maybe realistic. Maybe just because I'm still a little bit frustrated about how the season's going. I would even say 9 wins is kind of like you're safe because you're off your non-conference schedule for next season. At least the ones that I've found right now, just quickly checking them, are Illinois State to open the season, Michigan. Luckily, that's at home. Michigan isn't amazing. Their offense sucks too, but if Sharon Moore can keep the defense to be pretty good, and I'm sure he's going to have to go through some staff changes this offseason. If their offense can improve, like that's going to be a tough game in Norman. And then Temple again. It'll be at Temple, still Temple. And then you got, I don't know who their other. Sorry, I got logged off there. I don't know who their other non-conference game is. It's not on the OU website for some reason. But you get one other one. I would assume it's some what FCS team, since that's kind of what usually gets put in a late season SEC schedule. Still though, like you're gonna have a tough schedule. Eight wins is to be kind of his benchmark. I think is friendly. If he if it looks rough, I would even say like 8 wins might not be enough. Like it's got to be a significant improvement on offense. That and like Brandon said, you don't have to be the best offense in the country. You just have to be maybe top 40, and that will get you by.
there's a chance. It's going to be. I think just the schedule is tough. It's brutal. It's really not going to lighten up until after next season, where we won't have maybe such a gauntlet. But we're going to be gauntleted again next year, and I don't think that's going to be anything that's going to. Regardless of that, if I think eight is the number, and I mean personally, that's kind of where I'm going out, because if we go 8 wins next year, let's say it's Arnold or Hawkins at quarterback, one of them, they'll have another year after that, and they'll have something building with that with the OC, whoever it is, and I think that there's real promise going into that following season. 8 wins with a very tough schedule that gets a little bit lighter after that. Hopefully we go out and play like what Texas is playing this season, which I think is how the rotation would work. So it's going to be, Mississippi State and Florida and Vandy. But at that point, Pavi is gone. So maybe they're back to poverty. Who knows how that works. But the schedule's a little bit lighter. You win 8 games next year, there's a lot of reason to be optimistic going forward. And again, I think that's very attainable. I think injuries derailed the season from the start. They had a bad OC hire. You can't defend that. I get the idea, because I agree with you. This offseason, we thought he'd be decent. He's a guy that cares about the program. He went to Oklahoma. He's a guy that had successful offenses before in college football, not at this high of a level, but he was never bad on offense. And for if it's the injuries, if it's horrible offensive line play, who knows really what it is, but there was really no adjustments to the current situation. And that's, I think, his biggest knock. There was no real urgency to get better, and it just never did. So they made the right call firing him. You have 2 more games this year, and then I think if you're not have already started that OC search. I'm sure that there's some guys that they have circled that, as soon as the season ends, they're picking the phones up and trying to, schedule interviews and stuff and try to get the right guy in there. I don't expect it to be a super long process in the offseason. I would imagine, Josie and Venables or whoever's involved in this process has kind of already started, lining up their prospects or guys that they're going to target. And then, they'll be reaching out very quickly after the season, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the other thing that's really saving Brent Venables from being gone after the season is there's no real obvious head coaching candidates in this cycle when you go to the when you're looking ahead at the offseason, not just like think positively or negative about how the outlook of this program could be. Really, outside of the buyout, I don't think that's a huge issue for if you really want them gone, you're gonna find the money to get them the hell out of here. But there's not anyone that's like the obvious pick to replace him. Like Kurt Signetti, pipe dream, but what's the realism of him actually leaving Indiana after 1 year and potentially getting them in a college football playoff? Unrealistic, I would say. Like it's already pretty hard to think about Mike Shanahan being the offensive coordinator for Oklahoma after getting that far with that Indiana program. Uh, Maybe like a Will Stein, but then you kind of put yourself in that same situation where he's a first year, he would be a first time head coach, a very young head coach, someone that's only been an offensive coordinator at a big time program for 1 year now. Like there's not an obvious like guy there to replace Brent Venables if that were to be the decision that Josie and the administration make.
I'm not sure Kurt Signetti, you said pipe dream. I'm not sure even if that worked out and Kurt Signetti brought over his entire staff. That's really any better. If Kurt Signetti's playing this schedule right now with this current team, with it's as injured as it is, I'm not sure he's any better than 5-5 either. This season was derailed by a lot of things. I think injuries is a big thing. I think OC was a big thing, whatever. But I'm not sure no matter who you put in there, it's going to be a whole lot better right now, just with how the season, played out for us. It was really unfortunate, but it is what it is. Indiana is 9-0, and it's a great story. It's a feel-good story in college football. They've beaten nobody. They have beaten not one good team all year.
They're still undefeated.
They're 9-0 against a bunch of bad teams. If they go beat Ohio State, I'll start to maybe believe a little bit. But I think there's a reason why that they didn't get that much love in that initial college football playoff poll, and that is because there's nothing on their resume right now, really not one win that you can point to and be like, man, that's an impressive win. That's a good win right there. Not one. And again, I think
it's Indiana.
If you beat Ohio State, I'll believe, but they've beaten nobody.
Yeah, but I think if you change that brand, give them that exact same schedule, and put Ohio State's name behind it, they would still be at the same spot they are today. To an extent, it's still hard to be undefeated, and even with how easy their schedule may be, they're still they beat everyone and beat them.
9-0 is impressive. There's no doubt, but I mean, again, they've beaten not one good team, and I think that's a huge knock.
I'm just saying, I think you change that brand, keep the same schedule, make it Michigan, Ohio State, Oklahoma. If we were playing that schedule and we're 9-0, we would be top 4 in the country.
Florida International, Western Illinois, UCLA, Charlotte, Maryland, Northwestern, Nebraska, Washington, Michigan State, Michigan.
At that time, Nebraska
might be
Michigan
your best.
Is not good.
It's your best one of the season, but it's not an over the top impressive win. Kurt Signetti, great job at Indiana. To turn that program into 9-0, you got to give him a little bit of flowers. Beat Ohio State. Then I'll hop on, because Kurt Signetti in Oklahoma right now, with as injured as we are, and you put Brent Venables over there in Indiana playing that schedule.
I don't know. I would say he's doing more with less. Do you think that Indiana team is more talented than even the people that are currently playing for Oklahoma? With injuries, take the injuries into account. Do you think that their wide receivers are just, as a talent, better than the ones at Oklahoma?
Do I think their receivers right now are better than our receivers right now?
Yes. Talent-wise. Yes. Production, obviously.
Yes.
Because everyone's fucking better than that, production-wise.
I don't think that the the receivers that we are forced to start every single game this season, we're going to play more than 5 to 10 snaps a game if things worked out perfectly. I think Brennan Thompson may have gotten a game every now and again just to go straight. I don't think J.J. Hester, just like last season, J.J. Hester didn't play at all. I don't see a world where he would have played. Jacob Jordan's coming on, but I don't think he would have had the opportunity to come on without these injuries. I don't think anybody that we're currently seeing start at receiver and play the entire game at receiver were meant to play more than 5 snaps a game.
I disagree. Well, that part, yes, I think that part's true. But I think if you took any of the receivers that have played for Oklahoma, maybe with the exception of Jacob Jordan, just because he's kind of a diamond in the rough guy. I know he had a couple offers, for scholarship play at D1 programs out there before he committed to Oklahoma as a preferred walk-on. But if you take J.J. Hester, Zion Kearney, Jaquez Petaway, Brennan Thompson, you pick them up and plug them into that Indiana system. They're probably, talent-wise, one of the better talents they have, and then their offense is just good enough that they could actually scheme them open. I'm not saying the offensive coordinator is like that. The fact that they can't produce in the passing game for Oklahoma is 100% on Finley and Latrell. I'll 100% agree there. But talent-wise, I think we have more talent in the room than Indiana. They just know how to work with what they have better than we've known how to work with what we have.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know because I have no idea, who the receivers are. If they were 4 or 5-star guys, I have no idea.
I can promise you they have no 5 stars on that.
Before go, I think, Zion Kearney, it's not over for him. It's not over for a guy like Ivan Creon. They're very, very, very young guys. Zion Raggins. I think these are guys that you still have hope for long term. That I think could really start to play a little bit more next year. Assuming we have all 5 of our guys next year, then you can kind of mix them in. You can send Zion Raggins on a go ball next season. If you're fully healthy, if you have a good offensive line, and then that could be a lot of fun. Those guys are going to develop. I think they could be players. They were not meant to play. Right now it's the cards we were dealt that really sucked, and that's the thing that I get it. We're none of us are happy with the season. This last Missouri loss was like I swear it's probably the most devastated I've been in a loss in a long time, because that's a game that Oklahoma had won and invented a new way to lose. That sucked. That was horrible to watch. And again, I think 9 times out of 10, once R. Mason Thomas gets that sack and it's 3rd and 16, we win that game. I genuinely believe that. I think that was the 1 out of 10 times, and it happened on Saturday. And it was just, unfortunate, and that sucks. But you got to take these injuries into account. You got to take into account, no matter who you're playing at quarterback, you're either playing a guy who had 1 career start or 0. They're running for their life the whole time, and they're throwing to guys that were never meant to be out there with a terrible offensive coordinator. You can fix the offensive coordinator real quick. You hire the right guy in the offseason, boom, that's one problem gone. I think next year you have to. I think guys like EPL and Isaiah Autry, who have looked good in their little bit of flashes this season, I think they become full-time starters, especially EPL. I think that guy's going to be a monster. You mentioned Logan Howell and Hito Zaida. They're playing decent ball right now. They're going to have a whole offseason to get better. I think you have a guy in Michael Fasusi or Ryan Foji who could start from day one. I think they have all the skills, all the talent, all the all the things you need. So there's really no reason why next season you don't have at least a serviceable offensive line, an offensive line that we had last year. That's really all you need. Last year's offensive line was not the best offensive line in the country. It's not a Joe Moore winning award offensive line. But you had the right OC, you had a great quarterback, and you were able to score the ball a lot with that 5. I think that is the goal. And I think it's very attainable. I don't think we're going to be a top 5 offense like we were a year ago, but I think there's reason to believe that it can score 27 points a game, which is going to put you in every single game you play.
That we can agree. We just need something fixed. Hopefully it can actually get done this offseason, and a real search is done, not just that guy works kind of situation. All right. We've gone for a lot longer than we definitely expected to, but I think it was a good discussion. Go into the comment section. Let us know what you think. Should Brent Venables get a free season in a way? Just kind of go relax. Not relax, but be a little bit more confident that he has the backing of donors and the administration going into next season, or should hot seat be on the table 100% for Brent Venables? Again, go to the comment section. Let us know what you think. Go like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, follow us on all social media down below. We appreciate y'all watching. We'll see you next time.